Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and today's podcast is devoted to a movie that is certainly one of my favourite horror films of the 2000s, and actually one of my favourite horror anthologies of all time, and that is 2007's Trick or Treat. Now, Trick or Treat, believe it or not, is a film that didn't actually get a theatrical release. It's a movie that has actually gone on to amass a really strong cult following. I believe the original intention was actually for this film to get a theatrical release. It was slated to be released around Halloween time, 2007. Now, Warner Brothers, without any kind of explanation or reason, actually pulled the film from the schedule. And, you know, there was one theory floating around that they didn't really want this film to compete with Saw 4, which was being released at around the same time in that. Obviously, the Saw franchise, very successful horror franchise. And basically, long story short, this movie didn't end up getting a theatrical release. It went straight to DVD/Blu-ray in 2009. And as I said, this is actually one of the very best straight to DVD/Blu-ray films, horror movies that I've ever actually seen. I think Trick or Treat is a great movie. It's an anthology, of course, but what really makes this film stand out is the stories, how they're so cleverly interwoven with each other. The whole movie takes place on one Halloween night, and all of these stories are just so fantastically well connected to each other, almost seamlessly interwoven. And that's what really makes this film stand out from the majority of anthology films out there. It's not an anthology in the traditional sense, where there's kind of an overall wraparound. It's all seamlessly interwoven with each other. And this film just does a great job of capturing the Halloween spirit. It really does. Aside from 1978's Halloween, this to me is like the perfect Halloween movie. And what we also got in this film, of course, as well, in just one film, is we get a great new horror icon in Sam, who I think is a character that is almost instantly iconic. Just the look of the character, and he very much kind of encapsulates what Halloween is all about. Sam in this movie, for the people out there that don't respect Halloween, that don't follow the Halloween traditions, you're potentially on Sam's hit list. And I think this film is just very much a love letter to Halloween and to kind of the anthologies of yesteryear and the horror genre as a whole. You know, in this movie we get zombies, we get werewolves, we get what we believe to be a vampire. And yeah, this film's got Brian Cox, the very established actor that is Brian Cox, of course, the very first actor to play Hannibal Lecter on the screen in Manhunter. Anna Paquin's in here. Dylan Baker, who's great, a real kind of standout character to me in this film. And the film was directed by Michael Dougherty and produced by Bryan Singer. Of course, probably most famous for the likes of The Usual Suspects and, of course, you know, the X-Men franchise, having directed some of the X-Men movies. So, you know, there were some pretty big names actually attached to this movie. And, yeah, as I say, Dylan Baker's character, we learn quite early on in this movie, he's a serial killer. What I love about this movie, it's a film that manages to be fun. It's funny. It's not a movie that goes and tries to be outright scary. It's just a movie that has a lot of fun with its ideas and paying homage to the genre. Dylan Baker's character is actually a serial killer. It's kind of his Halloween tradition to kill people on Halloween. You know, he's a single father, and it's kind of a neat little kind of twist quite early on in the film where it actually turns out he's a school principal as well. And yeah, he kills this little kid on Halloween who's actually going around knocking all of these jack-o'-lanterns out, actually destroying all of these pumpkins. And I believe that most of the jack-o'-lanterns in this film were actually made out of either foam or ceramic. I think there was actually an on-set joke that no pumpkins were actually harmed during the making of the movie. But what I love is, as I said, you will often in this film, you will see characters from each story appearing, making little cameos, if you will, in other characters' stories. So it's just so very well put together that you probably won't notice everything upon a first-time viewing. And Anna Paquin, she plays the kind of virginal character, if you will, in this film, who is named Laurie, which again is a nod to John Carpenter's classic 1978 Halloween. And her and her friends, they're going to a party and all that, and they're all dressed up as various fairy tale nursery rhyme characters. She's actually dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, which is actually a great little piece of foreshadowing, in fact. The others are dressed up as Cinderella, Snow White, and Little Bo Peep, I believe. And ironically, the little kid that is actually with the lollipop in his mouth, who's actually spying, peeking in on the girls in the changing room, is actually the young boy that actually plays Sam, that actually plays the horror icon in this film. That is actually Sam, unmasked. And as I said, a great piece of foreshadowing for this film, because she's presumably going to become the victim of what's believed to be a vampire. She's being stalked by a vampire, and of course it turns out in a twist that he's not actually even a vampire. He's a guy that's wearing fake fangs. He actually kills a woman earlier on in the film, and there's a great twist that you really wouldn't see coming. And again, there's kind of slight foreshadowing to it, if you will. The killer, the vampire, is in fact the principal. It's Dylan Baker, who actually told his son earlier on in the film that he needs to go out. He's got a date. Presumably, a date translates as a victim. There's a real kind of funny moment, actually, where he's killed the kid early on in the film, and he's actually trying to bury the body, and his son just won't leave him alone. His son keeps, shouting up at him, and he's just trying to bury this body in peace. And Brian Cox is his neighbour, who's introduced properly later on in the movie, a guy that clearly hates Halloween. And, he scares some trick-or-treaters away. This is a guy that doesn't like Halloween. And we come to realise why. In what's, I think, a completely unexpected twist. There's a segment, the second segment of the movie, in fact, which is a real kind of highlight of the movie, I believe. The school bus massacre. We're told the story via flashback, in which a group of, challenged children, children with, special needs on Halloween, they're all wearing the Halloween costumes, and the parents are actually sick and tired of having to look after them. And rather harshly, they pay off the bus driver to basically get rid of their own children. And what happens is he drives the bus off, or he attempts to. One of the boys actually gets out wearing a Dracula costume, and he manages to survive. He actually manages to escape, but all of the children have died, and supposedly the bus is actually buried down in this canyon, and basically it's kind of the nerdy girl that's strung along. They're going to pull a prank on her. They actually scare her. They're dressed up as what's believed to be the dead children from the bus massacre, and it turns out to be a big prank. And of course, they get the comeuppance, just like any kind of Creepshow segment, Tales from the Crypt episode. Karma comes back to get them, and the real zombie children actually come out, and they get killed. Now, it turns out that the bus driver, in fact, is actually Brian Cox. It's the man that hates Halloween, so we can fully understand why this guy hates Halloween now. And, he actually wheezes whenever he's on screen, and we actually, again, kind of a great little kind of nod to it, is that when he actually gets out of the water, after surviving the bus dive, is he actually starts wheezing. It's the very same noise that Mr. Krieg actually makes later on in the movie. Now, again, kind of a great kind of twist. The whole kind of playing on people's expectations with a vampire. It turns out that Laurie, and again, there's little bits of foreshadowing here when they talk about, that she wants this to be great, a memorable first time. And that, of course, I believe her friend actually says to her that she's always kind of the runt of the litter. They're a pack of werewolves. Laurie and her friends are, in fact, werewolves. And, of course, the hunter becomes the hunted, with Dylan Baker's principal serial killer character actually being eaten at this feast of the werewolves. It's great. And what I also love in each of these segments as well is we get a little glimpse of Sam in each segment, who's kind of there, paying respect to the Halloween tradition. As I said, as long as you follow the rules of Halloween and that, you're safe. And of course, in the last segment of the movie, it's Mr. Krieg basically in a fight for his life against Sam, who I believe the chocolate bar that he actually uses, which actually has a blade inside it, again playing on the whole kind of Halloween tradition here. It's actually the very knife. It's actually one of the candy bars that Dylan Baker's character was actually attempting to give out earlier on in the film. It's kind of a fight. It turns into kind of slasher movie-esque territory towards the end. I think it's awesome. There's actually a moment where he gets his shotgun and he actually shoots his hand off, and his hand starts crawling back to Sam. Sam is he's a demon. This isn't going to be an easy to kill character. And Mr. Krieg actually remarks and actually says, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." Well, that's actually a nod to The Thing, in which, one of the highlights of the film to me is the moment with the head actually sprouting legs and walking off. That's actually what, I believe it's Palmer that actually says that, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." So it's actually a nod to The Thing, for which Michael Dougherty is a big fan of, as, many horror fans are, in fact. I just love the little kind of Easter eggs and all the little... I mean, there's a woman that the children who pull the prank on the young nerdy girl. They actually go to this woman's house, trick-or-treat, and the woman that answers. And it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it kind of moment, but she's actually a werewolf too. It's a very kind of, as I said, blink and you'll miss it, but she does actually appear at the werewolf feast later on in the movie. And the look of Brian Cox's character as well, I believe, is actually based on director John Carpenter. With the long straggly hair and the beard and that. I believe the film actually had many title changes as well before the film had even begun. I think Season's Greetings was actually the original title, but they didn't want to kind of they wanted to avoid any kind of confusion with this being a Christmas film. They call it Season's Greetings. You'd assume that could very well be a Christmas movie. I think Trick or Treat is actually a great title, and the film is actually based on Michael Dougherty's animated short film called Season's Greetings, which was released in 1996, which actually debuted the character of Sam. And of course, he's called Sam based on, Sam Hain. And also for eagle-eyed viewers out there, in the school bus massacre scene, which again I think is just a hell of a flashback, a hell of a scene. Just the music that really kind of accompanies it as well. Is that you can actually, again, blink and you'll miss it, you actually get to see a Plymouth Fury, the very car that was obviously the focus of 1983's Christine, directed, of course, by John Carpenter, written by Stephen King. I believe originally as well, the Rock Quarry, where they actually go down, this is where the school bus was. Apparently it was originally going to be a pumpkin patch. That was the whole idea of it, to be actually in a pumpkin patch. Now, I actually love the kind of opening to this film as well, that really sets the film up. We get it's like a public safety video, I believe, on kind of like Halloween, watch your candy, etc. and all that. Now, originally that was going to be actually used... that was actually used in the trailer. That was actually made specifically for the trailer. But apparently Michael Dougherty loved it so much that they actually decided to incorporate it into the movie, that being in the very beginning. Getting back to the first segment of this film with kind of Dylan Baker killing this little kid who should have checked his candy. Obviously he drags the body in, and the kids arrive, and of course they think it's a Halloween costume that he's wearing. He's covered in blood, and he actually sees Sam. He actually gives some candy to Sam, and of course you can tell he's actually kind of creeped out by this little figure here. Had he not have given him the candy, maybe Dylan Baker's character would have actually ended up on the hit list. Now, I know that Michael Dougherty actually wanted Dylan Baker. He was really the only actor he had in mind for this role, in fact, because he'd actually recently seen the film Happiness, which is Happiness is a good film, but it's a pretty hard watch. It's a pretty controversial, disturbing movie due to the subject matters that this film actually touches upon. But apparently that's what really gave Dylan Baker attention for Michael Dougherty. And, as I said, with this film as well, the fact that this was actually straight to DVD and Blu-ray, this film is really polished. It really is, right from its opening. Absolutely love the opening, and I believe that, this photograph scene at the opening were actual cast and crew members, actual real photos used, and the character of Sam, just such an iconic look. He, as I said, this film has actually gone on to amass a cult following. This film has a fan base. And Michael Dougherty did actually announce, this was announced officially back in 2013, that a Trick or Treat 2 was going to happen. We were going to get a sequel. Now, I realise that, quite a few years have passed, people changed their minds, etc. Obviously, he had Krampus, which came out in 2015, just a couple of years after the announcement. It doesn't look like this is going to be happening anytime soon. A Trick or Treat 2 may not happen. Which, I'm a little disappointed with, but at the same time, as Michael Dougherty said, it's just a great film that stands on its own two legs. It's just a great standalone movie. Does it need a sequel? No. But at the same time, if they could possibly get anywhere close to the first movie, I'd be more than happy. As I said, Trick or Treat, to me, is one of the best anthology films of all time, for just how well it celebrates, how well it captures the spirit of Halloween, as well as, as I said, all of these stories just being so perfectly interwoven with each other. There's a lot of Trick or Treat merchandise actually out there. There's a 15-inch vinyl figure from Sideshow Collectibles. I believe there's a 5.5, 6-inch figure of from NECA, obviously one of the big figure companies out there, of Sam, and of course Funko. I mean, Funko literally churn out everything and anything, don't they? Anything in the world of pop culture. Trick or Treat definitely has a fan base, and it's a film that I absolutely love. I remember seeing the trailer for it. The fact that it was an anthology had me sold, and the fact that it was set on Halloween as well, which is without a doubt my favourite holiday of the year. And just to kind of go into some little other aspects of the movie as well, is that the twist at the end. Okay, we get that Krieg is the bus driver. Okay. And he gets his comeuppance at the very end. Final shot of the movie. The zombie kids are there. Trick or treat. It's going to get killed. And there's another little... Because it kind of, it opens with a death, which, again, I think is really well done, in fact. This woman and her boyfriend are actually, they've been at the Halloween parade, the Halloween festival and that, and they're coming back, and she puts out the jack-o'-lantern. And much to his kind of angst, he's like, you shouldn't have done that. Yeah, and she's clearly not into Halloween like he is. And of course, this catches the attention of Sam, and she ends up getting killed, kind of a jump scare moment. And she's killed, and she's got the big lollipop in her mouth. It's quite a striking image to actually start off this movie with. But, leading into that... you don't really quite know what to kind of expect from this movie. She's trying to put all the Halloween decorations away, and there's this figure stood the other side of the road, just stood there, presumably staring at her. Very kind of Michael Myers-esque.
Definitely a homage to Halloween, I feel. And then, of course, it turns out to be a red herring. As someone just stood there waiting for his lift to show up. So I just love how this film actually plays on one's expectations. As I said, it's a great Halloween movie. It's a great anthology film. It's just a lot of fun. And, as I said, I'm sure there'd be a lot of things in there that people probably wouldn't pick up upon a first-time viewing. So, that's all I really want to talk about regarding Trick or Treat. I think it's an absolute gem of a movie. I really do. And as much as I'd love to see a sequel, I do believe it's pretty much, I'd say, a 50-50 at this point. I think as each year passes, I think it's becoming more and more unlikely. But at the same time, what we got was a great anthology movie that I think is one of the best horror, well, certainly one of my favourite horror films of the 2000s, for just how clever this film is. And as I said, it's really hard to believe. I have to remind myself on occasion that this wasn't even a theatrical release film. It was only really shown at some conventions before getting its, some festivals, before getting its DVD Blu-ray release. So. And just to get back to the werewolf scene that I was talking about earlier, I actually think the werewolf transformation scene is great in this film. And actually one of the best werewolf transformation scenes I've seen in quite some time. I mean, obviously you've got An American Werewolf in London and The Howling, both released in 1981. Both great werewolf transformation scenes. American Werewolf in London especially. It's it was a combination of practical effects and CG, but not to the point of being jarring. And I absolutely love the choice of song for this scene as well, which is actually Marilyn Manson's Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, which I actually think is a great cover. I'm not particularly a Marilyn Manson fan, but I do think this was a really good cover that really complements the scene well. And I believe the company that actually did this werewolf transformation scene were actually responsible for the Underworld franchise as well, for that franchise's effects. And also, just one other quick thing that I want to talk about as well is the scene with Dylan Baker. Now, Dylan Baker, as I said, is a single father. Obviously, the boy's lost his mum. And we get this scene where his son's trying to ask him to help me carve the pumpkin. And he gets a knife, and it looks like he's going to kill his son. It's kind of like the knife is above the son's head, and he stabs down. And we realise this is actually the victim's head. That he's actually getting his son to actually help him carve this boy's face. It really is quite dark when you think about it. And, obviously Dylan Baker is killed in the movie. Obviously, eaten by the werewolves and that. And we actually get this shot at the end of the film in which he's sitting there, out there, giving Candy, his son, and he's looking just like his dad. He's wearing the shirt, he's got the glasses on, he's like a spitting image of his dad. It really is quite a striking little scene. But, that's all I really wanted to talk about today anyway, regarding Trick or Treat. So thanks a lot to everyone that listened. And I'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. And if you've liked what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe. And, I'll be back again soon.